Proportional Response. Book 1. Chapter 21, Part 7. The frame of the question. Luma wished for a fleeting moment that she had the Arabso ability to watch two screens at once. She saw the Exultans, knowing they had been beat, all stop firing and divert all of their power to their shields. At the same time, she could see the voter's eyes go red and hear him scream curses at all of the cowards, and the translator quit even trying to keep up with the man's invectives. She then looked to her holoplot and zoomed in on the new, and only remaining, battle. 3 human ships dropped out of FTL, the last wisps of the spatial disturbance caused by their collapsing singularities skittering across their shields. The single dreadnought, the Voter, rode outmoused the combined weight of the human ships, but she hoped that didn't matter much. Beam weapons lanced out from the front of the human ships, while missiles and swarms of fighter craft poured out of their sides. She saw the 3 ships separate, and wondered why they didn't want to take advantage of one another's shields. The answer came to her a moment later, as each ship picked a different section of the dreadnought to concentrate their fire upon. A ship that big, its shields must be in sections, right? So the humans forced them to spread their power thinner by keeping multiple sections at full strength. I wonder if that will impact the Zoltan ability to fire. Her answer came with a series of energy blasts from the Zoltan ship which tore through space at the humans. I guess not. The 3 human ships turned, rolled, and fired all sorts of engines in attempts to dodge and absorb the fire from the Zoltan capital ship, and yet the barrage from the 3 of them never even slowed. Still, the battle did not appear to go well for the humans. The 3 ships, though large and impressive in their own right, did not seem to have the ability to hold in a stand-up battle with the massive Zoltan ship. I'd heard of human cunning and prowess in battle, but that cannot avail them here. This looks like a simple, straightforward slugging match, and it looks like the 3 ships which got the drop on the Voter are outgunned. A small sadness began to wash over her as she saw the Voter ship's FTL drive continue to spin up, despite the energy it had obviously diverted to both weapons and shields. Then 2 streaks on the plot caught her eye, and she nearly jumped from her seat in excitement. The other 2 fleets. She glanced down at her own display and checked the readings on the incoming ships. It seemed that the 2 fleets which entered the system first had sent several of their mid-sized cruisers and battleships to join the fight. Smart of them, I guess. Smaller ships have no chance against that massive thing, and larger ships can't turn fast enough to get their FTL engaged. Still, a courageous move. I hope they have the firepower needed. She then saw something else on her plot. The rest of the 2 human fleets had also entered FTL and headed toward the Voter's ship. For a moment, she wondered how the human ships had managed to form their singularities before the Voter could, then laughed at herself for being silly. The humans don't have their shields and weapons operating at maximum capacity. Trying to split power 3 ways has to be taxing on even that massive ship. The mid-sized warships from the human fleets arrived and took up positions around the Voter's ship. The 3 battleships which had initially engaged it immediately veered away, one of them obviously limping and leaking atmosphere. Luma felt her heart pang at the sight and spoke to Nera.
Signal rescue and repair ships. Tell them to make all haste to that human vessel, and don't let them give you any argument about an active battle. It will be well out of range before they can reach it. And I suspect this fight will be over shortly anyway.
Nera gave a curt nod and began to speak with some urgency into her headset. Luma turned back to the battle and found it had sort of stopped. The added human ships had taken position around the Voter's ship, but both sides had stopped firing. The Voter's ship had also started transmitting. The sound of the Voter's voice made her want to snarl.
I surrender. You can all stand down your weapons. My crew has received orders to cease fire and not to contest any action you wish to take. I repeat, I surrender. This ship will make no further attempt to flee, and you should be able to detect that our shields are dropping. I will surrender myself personally to you, the mighty human forces. Please stand by for my arrival.
Why does he sound out of breath? And was that pulse rifle fire I heard in the background? Luma looked at her readouts and saw that the power readings for the voters' ships did, indeed, appear to be winding down. She turned her attention back to Nera and the rescue ships that the woman had directed to go help the damaged human ships. Bless that young woman. She found captains willing to do the job, despite all of our species' proclivities. Her recommendation after all of this will, something moving on the plot caught her eye, and she turned back to it just in time to see a small shuttle leave the voters' capital ship. What game is that bastard playing at? Why would he leave? The thought cut off mid-word as the voters' ship began to spin lazily in space, having somehow lost its attitude control. Then its engine core exploded, and the back half of the ship simply wasn't there anymore. The remaining sections of the ship had already been split into multiple pieces by the blast, and several of them had fires which, briefly, blossomed out into the vacuum before the atmosphere required to sustain them leached away. She stood there and stared at her plot in horror, not even able to remember when she had stood. She forced herself back down into her chair, hit a button, and spoke with all the force she'd learned from decades working space control into her voice.
This is Space Control calling a Class 1 emergency. All space-worthy ships who can receive this transmission are ordered to proceed at your best possible speed to the following coordinates, and render aid to any survivors you find.
A human voice came on the comms immediately.
Space Control, this is Human Task Force Hoofbeat on assignment from the 5th Fleet. The Admiral respectfully requests that you belay that order to all of your ships. There are...
The speaker stifled a sob, then continued.
There is nothing for your ships to do. The only survivor of that self-destruct was the voter. In his private shuttle, he is maneuvering to surrender himself to our fleet now.
Luma's blood boiled. I never thought I'd feel sympathy for a Zoltan, but even they didn't deserve to be stabbed in the back like that by their own leader. The fact that he'd made her feel sympathy for Iltons made her even more furious. She felt her hand moving towards the weapon's controls, barely even realizing with conscious thought what she'd decided, or at least begun to consider, to do. Her lip curled in hate and anger. How dare he? After everything, every indignity he'd put her and her people through, he simply murdered thousands of his own kind, and then gets to sit comfortably in a human PW camp. No, she told herself. He doesn't get to... Luma's anger flared as Nera grabbed her hand and interrupted her thoughts. The impudence! She turned eyes full of fury on her subordinate, but her rage met a look of sadness, mixed with deep sympathy, and that took the fury right out of her. Nera stood there and held her hand, while the younger woman's head shook slowly.
I can't let you do that, ma'am. Did you know that nearly half of the time spent turning our people into bulls is dedicated to teaching us how to minimize the damage to our psyches when we kill? There are a number of methods they teach, and we are encouraged to become familiar with them before we even volunteer for the change in order to try and get an idea of which ones will work best for us. I know you have had to order people to fire on ships before, and that has probably even resulted in some deaths. But those were at a great distance, with minimal emotional involvement, in a crisis situation, and you were attempting not to kill. And I am sure you trained to handle it, and still had to spend a lot of time in therapy for it, yes?
Luma nodded to the young woman, feeling somewhat numb all of a sudden. Nera continued.
This is a cold-blooded kill after the crisis is ended. We sometimes lose bulls to psychosis when they have to make a kill like that. And it is sometimes necessary, don't get me wrong, but you... No, ma'am. Please, don't do this to yourself.
Luma let her hand go limp and looked at the plot through watery eyes. Her hand started to shake, and Nera released it. What? What did I almost do? I almost killed someone. A living, sapient being. Darkness began to creep into the edge of her vision, and Nera gently pushed her back in her command chair.
I've chosen my primary mental construct for coping with what I will have to do as a bull, and I think it may help you when you wake. No doubt, you are asking yourself something along the lines of what did I just almost kill? I will suggest to you an alternative. What are the humans allowing to live?
The new question gave her a strange sort of cold comfort as she let the darkness overtake her.